creators, it's Melissa from Melissa's Creations, here to bring you card number 15 in my Clean and Quick Cards series. I love this card so much. It has so much personality, even though it is completely flat. I've used some of our Stampin' Right markers to color in these beautiful stamps, and it's just very simple and elegant, and I love how it turned out. I can't wait to show you how I did it. Let's get started. I'm starting with a card base standard size. This is a very vanilla piece of cardstock cut at 5.5 by 8.5 and scored in the middle at 4 1/4. I'm going to go ahead and crease that score line with my bone folder. The stamp set I am using today includes Falling Flowers and One Big Meeting. These are two beautiful sets that coordinate so nice together. I just love it. I use this a lot, as you may have known if you are a returning viewer of mine. Today we're going to use the sentiment, "Thank you for everything and more." And we're going to use quite a few of these gorgeous flower and leaf pieces here. Now we are going to use the masking technique, and it is helpful if you have the Mayflowers framelits dies. We're going to be cutting out some of those images using these dies, and that will help us to get that 3D effect. If you do not have the dies, you can certainly cut these shapes out by hand. It just makes it go a little quicker. So I've taken some scrap cardstock and cut out my images with those framelits dies, and I've just taken a little bit of our Tombow multi-purpose liquid glue, and I've put some on the back of each of these pieces, and then I let it dry so that it just became slightly tacky. You don't want it to be too sticky or else it will rip your card. So make sure that you have either a temporary adhesive or you allow that liquid glue to dry fully, and make sure that it's not too tacky that it will stick permanently to your card base. All right, I'm going to mount up the flowers that I'm going to need to use on my cards. I'm going to bring in a few of my blocks here. And the first one is definitely this large, beautiful flower here. We also need this star, what I call the star flower. I think it's very, very pretty. We're going to use this little pod guy. I don't know the actual name, if it has a name, but I'm going to call it the pod guy. And then we're also using this leaf here, along with this leaf right here. Now, there are so many possibilities for this card and this stamp set. You could really get into it with this flourish, but I'm just going to stick with these pieces. I am using our archival Stampin' Pad in basic black. If you prefer, you can also use the Memento or the Stays On ink. I'm going to start with that today. And I am using our standard Stampin' Right markers. Now, I don't do a lot of hand coloring, as most of you may know, but I'm trying to branch out, especially since our Stampin' blends just came out. I have a few on order and I'm excited to try those. So I'm venturing out into the world of coloring and I'm bringing you along with me. This is actually one of my very first projects using coloring with our Stampin' Right markers, and I have to say, I don't think it turned out too bad. So I'm pretty proud of it and I wanted to share it with you. All right, let's get to stamping. I'm starting with the large flower, and you're going to want to start with the flower that you want to pop out the most. What you want in the foreground is what you're going to start with. So I'm taking this flower. I also want to bring in some scratch paper because we will be stamping off on our project. We're going to stamp off the edges of our card. So scratch paper there, ink here, stamp here, and here we go. We're going to start by stamping our large flower down at the bottom here. And we're also going to stamp one up at the top over here. All right, now that I have those, I'm just going to let them dry in between stamping just for a few seconds to help prevent smearing. This ink is very inky, and sometimes if you touch it or rub it or put a mask on top of it before it's had time to dry properly, it will smear. You can help speed up that process if you'd like by using your heat tool, but I am just going to let it naturally do its thing for a few seconds in between stamping. And once you have given that a little bit of time to dry, you're going to take your mask and you're going to place that on top of your flower piece. So it might be tricky to line it up. If you do have trouble lining up your mask with your stamp, this little tab here is going to line up with the tab on your framelit piece. And if you mark that on your template when you cut it out, it will make it a lot easier for you to figure out what direction it goes when you are going to put your mask down. Now I'm going to stamp my star flower next to this piece here. I want to make sure that it looks like it is actually behind this flower. So to do that, I am going to put my mask down, but I'm going to leave some black stamping around the edge. I'm going to zoom you in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. I have my mask here and I'm going to leave the black edge of my stamp exposed. So we're just going to cover up most of it, leaving that black edge. And then when we go to stamp our second layer, I'm going to stamp one up here. And that is going to pop out more than the other one I'm going to stamp right here. So I'm going to grab the mask for this flower. And again, make sure that you leave some of that black edge exposed. Okay, so we're going to ink up our flower again. And we're going to stamp it partially on both of our previous mats and mostly off. And also off the bottom of the page, slightly, like so. And before we remove these, we're going to stamp a couple of our small leaves. So I'm going to take that small leaf and just do a few right here. And I'm also going to use this leaf stamp in the corner, right over here like this. And let's bring one of these small leaves coming up out of the edge, like so. Okay, so I'm going to move these masks off. And you can see that those images look like they are behind the previous image that I stamped. Now, the closer your mask is to the edge, the farther away your second stamped image will be. So you can see that I didn't quite make contact on these pieces here. Now you can go ahead and restamp them if you have your Stamp-A-Majig or another positioning tool. I'm going to leave them alone because I can color them in with my markers. You won't really notice so much. I'm going to put my mask back onto this flower down here so that I can stamp my little pod guys. So I have my pods here. I'm going to make those come out this direction. And we are also going to put another leaf over there. Okay, and let's do another pod in the corner. And maybe one more leaf at the bottom here. There we go. Now I'm going to repeat that technique up on the top edge of my card before we stamp our sentiment. All right, now I'm going to stamp my sentiment. Thank you for everything and more. So I'm going to ink that up in my basic black, and we're going to stamp it off to the right a little bit on this card. So I'm going to put it right here. So depending on where you want to stamp your sentiment, you may want to stamp your sentiment first so that you know how much white space you have to play with when you are positioning your flowers. Let's get into the coloring portion of this card. I don't like to use too many colors when I am doing any coloring in, so I just have technically 3 colors, but I have 5 markers here. So I have 2 reds, 2 greens, and a yellow. Now I am going to start with my darkest color first, which is going to be my red large flowers, and I'm going to take the fine tip edge, and the first thing I want to do is do small little lines towards the center of each of the flowers. And then sometimes on these thinner lines, I'm going to take it all the way out to the edge. Okay, and then to create the illusion of a shadow, I'm going to run that darker color out to the edges of the first layer of flower. So I'm going to do more of those little lines. Basically, I'm just doing like a zigzag motion, and then whenever the first layer of that flower dips down, I'm going to follow those lines. And then every once in a while, I'm just going to bring that red up some of those smaller lines on this flower here, just to create a little bit more depth. And then with the brush or thick tip of my Real Red marker, now this one was Cherry Cobbler, so that was my dark. I'm using Real Red for my light. I'm going to come back in and just color in all those petals. And then I'm going to take my yellow, which is So Saffron, and with the small point, I'm going to color in the middle of those little stamens. I'm going to rotate this so that I can color in the rest. Now I'm going to use the brush tip for the middle of my 5-point flowers. And then I'm going to use the fine tip to do a technique called stippling. And that is where you just do a bunch of tiny little dots all around. And the more concentrated the dots, the more filled in it looks. And the more spread out the dots, of course, the thinner it looks. So I'm concentrating those dots down towards the center of the flower. And then I'm going to spread them out when I get closer to the end of the petals. And finally, with some of our greenery, I'm going to take the darker color green. This is Garden Green. And I'm going to do the same technique that I did with the previous flower. I'm going to use the fine tip to kind of create some depth with that darker color, and I am going to color in this blank space here so that it's a little less noticeable that my stamp didn't make full contact with my mask that was placed down there. So there we go. Just going to color that in a little bit and then bring that line up every once in a while to create a little bit more depth. I'm going to come up a little bit higher on the sides of those leaves. And then I'm going to bring in my Wild Wasabi, and with my thick end, I'm going to color the rest in. And same thing for our little pods. I'm just going to do a few little strokes down here at the bottom. I'm going to bring one line up every little bit here. And then I'm going to do this leaf while I'm here. and there are a few tips for beginning coloring. Now, I am by no means any kind of expert colorer. I have just taken some of the knowledge that I've gained through my art classes and a few of the tips that I've picked up here and there from other demos, and I'm applying it to coloring in this gorgeous stamp set. Another really fun thing that you can do with a card like this is to leave it blank so that your recipient can do some coloring of their own. Just wrap up a few markers as a gift and you are set to go. I'll be coloring the rest of this off camera as it is a little time consuming, but it is still a beautiful card and can be clean and quick if you decide to not color it in for your recipient. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button to be notified of future videos, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this card today. You can get all the supplies that you need on my website at melissascreations.com. Your support helps me to continue doing what I love, which is bringing out videos for you to enjoy. You can also follow me on Facebook over at facebook.com/mcreations, and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest with the handle @mcreations. Thank you so much for visiting. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!